Duke football, meet your toughest non-conference game ever. MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, breaking down the schedules in the Power 5 and ranking them 70 all the way up to number 1. We've arrived at schedule number 42. Want to remind you to do your Amazon shopping using the link in the description section below. It doesn't cost you an extra penny, and it helps support the channel. All right. Also, the Voice of College Football's community is on Patreon. Please join us there. We've got a number of exciting features in store right there. We believe Duke has the 5th most difficult schedule in the ACC. I've ranked it as 42nd in the nation. It's highlighted by a trip to Atlanta, not to take on Georgia Tech, but to take on Alabama August 31st. Duke, Alabama, in Alabama's annual neutral site game because they never like to travel to anywhere and play an out-of-conference game. And this year it's Duke, poor Duke. Last year was poor Louisville, as Alabama is somehow getting away with scheduling some of the marginal, if not worst, teams in the ACC 2 consecutive seasons. So that anyone's going to anticipate watching a good game when Duke meets Alabama in Atlanta, I would be surprised. So that's Duke's initial game. I credit them for scheduling that game, especially since they've got Notre Dame out of conference later in the season in November. So let's size it up from week 1. Duke, Alabama, and Atlanta. Then they've got a couple wins in North Carolina A&T and a game on the road against Middle Tennessee. Bye week, then they dive into the ACC. And, of course, you know the drill. Who do you play in the other division? That determines how difficult your schedule is, especially in the ACC and the SEC, and to a lesser degree, the Big Ten. Who do you play in the other division? For Duke, it's Syracuse, and, of course, they are rivals with Wake, so they play the Demon Deacons every year, so that's a fairly difficult draw, but there's no Clemson or Florida State for Duke. All right, so they open ACC play September 27th. That sounds like a Friday night game. I love these Friday night games. Duke at Virginia Tech. When I know somebody's playing on Thursday or Friday, there's usually a few games, but especially on Friday, there's very few games. So I know I'm going to be watching Duke at Virginia Tech. I don't know if that's a good thing, but I'm going to be watching that game. The next week, Duke takes on Pitt. And the Coastal Division is so up for grabs unless Miami really puts the talent together in Manny Diaz's first year. These teams are all roughly the 35th to 50th best teams in the country. So you can't point to 2 or 3 games as being the biggest games of the season. We can take a shot at it, but it's not like the SEC Eastern Division. Georgia, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Florida, Kentucky, Florida, Tennessee. You know, there's not just a few games that you can point to and say, those are the most important games. Any of these teams could rival Miami and play for the Coastal Division Championship, as we've seen in recent years. They're taking turns. Duke, Georgia Tech, North Carolina, Virginia Tech. I'm up to 2016. And then Miami. And then last season was, of course, Pitt. That is how many consecutive years with a different division champion in the Coastal? 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. All different division champions. Not one team repeated in that time span. And so we've got a number of games that could be important because we're probably going to have a glut of teams that go from 5-3 to 3-5 in the Coastal Division. So, again, it's Duke and Georgia Tech October 12th. Game at Virginia for Duke on October 19th. At North Carolina, October 26th. So, all those games are toss-ups. Duke at Virginia Tech, then Pitt, then Georgia Tech, then at Virginia, then at North Carolina. Okay, bye week. And then this is a difficult stretch. Maybe not at first glance, but think about it. After the bye week on November 2nd, Duke concludes its season with these 4 games. Notre Dame at home, Syracuse at home, at Wake Forest, Miami. And maybe they play Miami November 30th for the division championship. So for Duke, again, it's Syracuse and Wake Forest, the two non-conference or non-division games. Alabama and Notre Dame highlight a very difficult non-conference schedule. So it's the fifth-rated schedule in the ACC. It's number 42 in the nation. Of course, shop at Amazon using the link below and join us at Mark Rogers TV's Voice of College Football Community on Patreon. And we will be back with schedule number 41.